students, today we'll be discussing the concept of Raj Dharma in Manusmriti. The objective for today's discussion is to understand how did the state originate, what was the nature of kingship, the qualities of a ruler, the duties of the king, and whether the state outlined in the Manusmriti was a welfare state or not. For the convenience of our understanding, I have divided the discussion into a number of segments. We will start with a quick glimpse of the text, the various chapters, and then we would concentrate on chapter 7, that is Raj Dharma. Then we would move on to the origin of state, the qualities of a ruler, and specifically the functions of the ruler. Now, Manusmriti or Manav Dharma Shastra, as it is popularly called, is one of the greatest treatises on politics and statecraft. Manu was said to be the first person to systematize the science of politics and administration. Manusmriti comprises of 2685 verses divided into 12 chapters. Manu is considered to be the progenitor of the human race, the first lawgiver, and the founder of social and a moral order, a rishi to whom sacred books were revealed. A quick snapshot into the contents of the Manusmriti. Chapter 1 of the Manusmriti speaks about the origin of the universe. Chapter 2 of the Manusmriti consists of the different parts and duties of the Varnas: hereditary occupation, process of purification, brahmacharya, devotion to the guru, etc. Chapter 3 speaks about a householder's life, the grihastha, performance of his functions, marriage, etc. The fourth chapter also speaks about grihastha's life, occupation, the varna order. Chapter 5 deals with pure and impure food, edible and non-edible things, ceremonial purification in everyday life. The sixth chapter emphasizes on vanprasth and sannyas, the last two stages of a man's life. Chapter 7 elaborates Raj Dharma, about which we shall be studying today. Chapter 8 speaks about civil and criminal law. Chapter 9 speaks about distribution of property. Chapter 10 speaks about the duties and customs of different castes. The 11th chapter speaks about penance, performance of sacrifice, and how to purify oneself. The last chapter speaks about karma, self-knowledge and purification of the self, and the creation of a good life, a dharmic life. Now, as we have just seen, chapter 7 speaks about Raj Dharma, various aspects of statecraft and governance. The 8th chapter also speaks about a part of Raj Dharma, specifically portions pertaining to civil and criminal law and the duties of the king pertaining to deliberation and providing justice. The concept of Raj Dharma is said to be one of the fundamental concepts in Hindu political thought. Let us see what does the Manusmriti speak about Raj Dharma. Manusmriti begins with the origin of state and kingship, with the divine right theory of kingship. Manu was said to be the ardent supporter of the divine right theory, and it is said that the state was the creation of God. K.P. Jaiswal, a scholar working on Hindu political thought, is of the view that the theory of divine kingship was advanced in the Manusmriti to support the formation of the Brahmin empire of Pushyamitra and to denounce the Buddhist theory of the social contract theory of origin of state. God is considered to be the creator of the universe, the cosmic process. He is responsible for the welfare of universe and mankind. The state was a reflection of this harmony and order in universe. Afraid of chaos and disorder, the Lord of the world created the king for ruling the earth. The king was formed by the Lord out of the eternal particles which were said to be divine in origin. It is said that the king was born out of 8 particles of deities. They are Vayu, Yam, Surya, Agni, Varun, Chandra and Kuber. It is said that the king was a representative of divinity, and hence his right to rule came from this divine power because he was a representative of God on earth. Manusmriti speaks about the different elements of the state. Through the Saptang theory, Manusmriti advances the 7 organs of the state, or Saptang as it is called. What are the 7 organs of the state? They are the king or the Raja, who is called the Swami; Amatya, the ministers; Janpad comprises the territory and population; Durga comprises a system of fortification; Kosh refers to treasury; Danda refers to both the system of punishment as well as the armed forces; Mitra refers to alliances and friends. The Saptang theory of the state provides that all the different organs of the state are complementary to each other. The elements mutually cooperate to produce a harmonious social and political order. There is an organic unity amongst the different elements, and all the elements work in conjunction with another one. Manu has also tried to emphasize the unity of the 7 elements, though he has focused on the fact that each of these elements have independent character, independent functions, but then they work together as a whole, as an organic unity. Manu specifically focuses on duties of the ruler. Who can be a king? How can he be elected? What are the qualities of a king? Manu was very focused on the right pedigree of a ruler. Qualities do matter. Manu's king was an ideal man, well educated, scholarly, efficient, and a person of high moral standard and intellectual wisdom. He prescribed for certain virtues that a king should have. The king had to be free from corruption. He should pursue dharma, arth, kam, and moksha in balance, the 4 pillars of life. Since he is the chief executive of the state, the king should also possess qualities like sama, dhamma, danda, and bheda to ensure that the perfect kingship can be created. Modesty for Manu was the primary attribute of the king. Modesty and humility can create a large empire. The king should be modest, polite, courteous, yet firm and strict to ensure that preservation of right can be maintained. A king, Manu says, who is modest never perishes. Even the hermits gained wealth and state if they were modest. Prithu and Manu also gained sovereignty. Kuber, the position of the lord of wealth, and son of Gadhi, the possession or the rank of a Brahmin. Therefore, humility works wonders according to Manu. Manu also says that a king should be free from certain vices like hunting, gambling, music, addiction to women, excesses, drunkenness. These should be avoided by the king. At the same time, the king should also avoid animosity, treachery, seizure of property by evil means. In other words, he should be a man of dharmic quality, and that is what makes a king. Let us now move on to Raj Dharma, or duties of the king. The duties of the king comprises of executive duties, legislative, administrative, financial, military, welfare, judicial functions, which is also called Danniti, and finally interstate relations. Let us move on to these different functions of the king one by one. Let us start with the executive powers or duties of the king. The first executive duty of the king is the protection of all the castes. This does not mean he can interfere with the caste, but he has to ensure that every caste maintains its varna dharma. Maintenance of income and expenditure is another executive function of the king. The king should also maintain the conduct of the personnel, ministers, officials, army. He should keep a strict eye on all of them. At the same time, the king should ensure building of forts, roads, ensuring that the resources of the state are well spent. The king, as a chief executor, should also enforce laws depending on the nature of the populace. Finally, as the executive authority, he is responsible for safeguarding and protecting the weak from the strong. Let's come to the administrative duties of the king. Appointment of ministers and sachivas and distribution of functions constitute another important function of the king. But then, the king should ensure that his ministers and officials are efficient and effective in the performance of their functions. Appointment to each department should also be done by the king. In other words, officials, civil servants should also be appointed by the king. The king has to carry out his duties in consultation with the ministers, and therefore the composition of the council of ministers is very important. If the king becomes independent of the council, Manu says, he invites his own ruin. The king, as the chief administrator, is also responsible for local governance. Though Manusmriti speaks about decentralization of power, the head of the village being the Gramika, yet the king should keep an eye on village administration, on city administration, and he should ensure that all administrative affairs are executed by him in his name. Now, if the council of ministers are so important, if officials are so important, and if the king has to listen to their advice, it is also essential to understand that their appointments should be perfect. And therefore, Manusmriti outlines certain tests, certain criteria for appointment. Manu says that the ministers, the council of ministers, should consist of learned, efficient people who are loyal to the state and the king. They should be well versed in Vedic texts. There were certain important principles to be followed by the king before making appointments. He includes a number of tests. For example, the principle of tradition is one of the tests. The second test is the principle of ability. The third test is judging people through the test of courage. The fourth test is the test of examination and ensuring that people fulfill the objectives for which they are appointed. Manu was of the opinion the selection of ministers must be through hereditary principle. That's fine. But then merit should also play an important part, and a contender should be tested whether hereditary or on the basis of merit. This means that appointments were not dependent on the sweet will of the king. Let us now move on to the legislative functions of the king, which is an important part of Raj Dharma. Promulgation of laws in consultation with the council of ministers is an important duty of the king. The laws should be made in accordance with dharma. Laws should also reflect societal customs. In no way the king should make laws which override caste dharmas or customs of society. Tradition should also be taken into account. The laws should be enforced to ensure greatest good of the greatest number. It should bring about the welfare of the community, society, and polity. The objective of laws is to maintain societal order, harmony, and happiness of the people. Let us now move on to the next function, the judicial powers of the king. It is a duty of the king to render justice to everyone. Both the parties should be heard before justice is provided. Justice should be as deserved, neither too strict nor too lenient. It is the duty of the king to examine daily the litigations that have been filed under the 18 titles of laws called the Vyavharapads. He has to dispense justice, inflict dand or punishment according to the nature of the case. He should be assisted in this performance of this function by counselors and Brahmins. The power of force should be used judiciously by the king, and punishment should definitely be given after careful consideration. The king who is truthful, wise, efficient, effective, he would definitely impart justice after careful consideration. The ultimate purpose of inflicting danda or punishment is to ensure the individual security of the person, the society and the polity, to ensure stability of the societal order. Let us now move on to the financial functions. Manu emphasizes the importance of a rich filled treasury. A nation's well-being and security is dependent on the wealth of the nation, prosperity of the nation, and for this reason Manu emphasizes on imposition of taxes, rates and tolls. It is an impressive part of the Manusmriti to discuss in detail how tolls and taxes can be imposed, over whom it can be imposed. The king was empowered to collect taxes for providing protection to the population. In fact, the king was justified to impose taxes because the money accrued from the taxes would be used for the welfare of all. Taxes must be collected for both land as well as cattle. There should be a certain fixed portion that has to be collected. The system of taxation should be such that it should enhance the nation's wealth. He also stated that if the subjects are overburdened with tax payments, it would lead to great amount of frustration, discontentment among them, and would eventually lead to natural calamities, national disaster and crisis in the country. Manu also advised the king that the entire amount collected by way of taxation should definitely be used for the welfare of all, for proper administration. Now, what kind of taxes can be imposed? Manu speaks about taxes as well as tolls, because this is the principal source of prosperity, principal source of revenue generation for the state. Manu advises the king that taxes should be based on the ability to pay off the people and according to their occupation. The king is entitled to 1/50th of gold, 1/6th of crop and 1/12th of commerce. Taxes were levied on all kinds of products: land, cattle, trees, meat, honey, butter, perfumes. In fact, all kinds of products that were produced, there were taxes which were imposed. Even products made of stone, natural products, taxes were imposed. Another very important source of tax or enriching the treasury was through tolls. The tolls were levied on common inhabitants for carrying goods from one place to another place, just like we have it today. No taxes were levied on those who were doing manual labor. This is an interesting part. People who did not receive any kind of payment but were only engaged in manual labor should not be taxed. But then that does not mean they were outside the purview of the entire system of collection of revenue. Mechanics, artisans, Shudras who had to do manual work to earn a living. And since they were not able to pay taxes, they were required to work for the king for one day each month without receiving any payment. This was their way of contributing to the exchequer. Let us now come to military function. The king was the supreme commander of the armed forces. It was his duty to make proper appointments of the different branches of the army. He has to ensure that the army was kept satisfied through regular payments of salaries. The army was well equipped, trained, and because the defense of the kingdom was entrusted in the army, and the king was supposed to supervise military administration. Next, we move on to welfare functions of the king, which is very important and significant because Manu's state was a welfare state. The king was supposed to treat all his subjects equally, and he should be free from any kind of apathy towards any segment of the population. It was the duty of the king to support the aged, helpless, orphans, widows, should protect people suffering from diseases. He has to regulate the social lives of the people, protect them from anarchy and aggression. He must also maintain law and order. The kingdom should be free from robbers and thieves. Protection should be given to private property. He should bestow favors to deserving people. He should control the prices of commodities, should check the weights and measures to ensure that merchants in the markets do not take recourse to scrupulous practices. He should also ensure that security should also be given to traders and merchants. Finally, he should encourage trade and agriculture and should ensure the well-being and security of all. The next important function pertains to Danniti. It is believed that men are intrinsically evil in nature. Evil tendencies are common, and therefore Dand is supposed to protect the people. It is the basis of law. Brahmins was exempted from capital punishment by the king, but then it was the duty of the king to provide proper application of danda, because danda was also the key to prosperity and to ensure the protection of individual as well as the community. He believed that it was danda which keeps the people and society in proper order. Danda also helps in the preservation and promotion of dharma. Finally, Manu discusses at length interstate relations. The aim of pursuing international relations was to establish political expediency and establish righteousness in the world. Manu was in favor of war, but under two conditions: when there is a threat to the territory of the state, and second, when he wants to expand the territory. The primary duty of the king is to protect the kingdom, and therefore, in order to protect the kingdom and the people, he has to pursue the right kind of interstate relations. For this purpose, Manu advises the king to pursue special techniques which he called Chaturopaya, which comprises of 4 techniques. They are conciliation, dissension, bribery and force. However, Manu advises that force should be used in the last resort. Manu also speaks about the types of foreign policy. They are peace, war, neutrality, preparation for attacking the enemy, treaty making, and double policy, which is making peace with one and war with another. The king should follow the right kind of policy at the right point of time. He should wage war only when he knows that he is strong enough and he is in a position to defeat his enemy. The Dharma Shastras and Manusmriti also focuses on Dharma Yudh. Even war should be fought on principles of Dharma. We have studied the different functions of the king or Raj Dharma. We have found that the functions of the king are comprehensive, many and onerous. But this does not mean that the king is an arbitrary despot. He has to function within the principles of Dharma. He has to ensure that the functions performed by him bring about prosperity, well-being and security of the state. Manu was a strong advocate of the moral roots of political power. Let us quickly sum up what we have studied today. We have studied that chapter 7 comprises of Raj Dharma, the duties of the king, where we have studied how the state was created, the divine right of kingship. We have studied the Saptang theory of the state, the 7 organs. Then we had studied the qualities essential to be a king. And then we had studied the manifold duties and powers of the king in terms of executive, legislative, administrative, financial and interstate relations. And finally, we have understood that the king was also circumscribed by dharma and he was not an arbitrary despot. Thank you.